Hey, what's up? This is Wilsford with Abysmal Hymns, and I have Reza Mills with me, and we're about to go over our top five metal albums of the 80s. As we had discussed last week, these were pretty easy for me because they were pretty seminal albums that formed my taste in music as a kid and have, lasted with me over the years. And I mean, I think it says something that, most of these albums I bought on cassette when they came out, and I still listen to them like on a weekly basis. So here you go. What are your thoughts on the whole, I know it's a little different era for you, but what are your thoughts on 80s metal?
Yeah, challenging, but not impossible. I think I managed to come up with five that that I certainly enjoy. And, obviously, I guess as we've discussed on the show before, you're certainly more sort of in this world than me and more and better versed, let's say. But, I'm pretty satisfied with my picks and yeah, should be good, should be fun.
All right, cool. Well, how about you kick it off?
Right, so let's go start off with something comparatively light compared to the rest of my list. And I'm going to start off with 1985's Fly on the Wall by AC/DC. Not a particularly well-liked album. Um, and I can see why from a production standpoint, it's absolutely terrible. But I think the band produced it themselves from what I remember and did a really crappy job. But that said, I remember this well because there was like a mini film, like a series of videos, and they composed like an animated film. I mean, it's dated somewhat, but certainly pioneering for that time. And yeah, just, AC/DC are one of those bands, you know exactly what you're going to get. You're not going to get, deep and meaningful lyrics and amazing, weird time signatures. They're like Motorhead. They're like any of those bands. They're pretty much, what you hear is what you get. Each album is fairly interchangeable. Um, I feel like they're a big influence on not only the cock rock that was coming up at that time, some of which I know that you don't mind as much as I do, but bands like Cinderella, etc. But also a huge influence on the bands that are crossing over into metal from hardcore bands such as SSD and DYS, for example. All of them were huge fans of AC/DC. So a very important band, and they also had a bit of punk attitude intermingled with their sort of bluesy, hard rock, heavy metal-ish sound. So yeah, I definitely think Fly on the Wall deserves more coverage than it gets, and it's always a record that I've been very fond of, despite its faults. So that's my first choice.
Right. It definitely felt like a transition for them because I think after this it was what Who Made Who came out.
Yeah,
And then they went into like Thunderstruck and that kind of era where they saw them getting bigger again. So this was like, I guess like for them a commercial kind of lull, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad album. There's a lot of bands that I like where it's their commercial lull albums are the ones that I like the most.
sure.
Um,
Absolutely.
and I be like wasn't into AC/DC yet when this came out. I just couldn't understand the concept of guys in jeans playing music like they just got off work. But,
Yeah,
I mean, I didn't realize that was kind of their blue collar thing, everybody that maybe not on this list. This list is a little toned down when it comes to the makeup and the leather, but
sure.
yeah, I can definitely appreciate. I mean, I like AC/DC now, and I'm
Yeah,
sure that's an album that I need to go back and revisit.
yeah,
It's one I think I bought it at one of those things where you remember you could like send in a penny and get like 12 cassettes or something like that. And I think that that was one of the ones I picked at some point. But, you know,
yeah. The only song that I would probably say to people who are listening to this to ignore is a song called Danger, which is an absolute tedious bluesy shuffle. It's terrible. It's so boring. It really, at least it's a single. I don't know why. It was a completely pointless song, but the rest of the material on here is fantastic. I mean, as you can expect lyrically, double entendre, sink the pink, whoa, not about snooker, I don't think. So yeah, usual cheeky innuendo as you would expect, but it just I don't listen to them all the time, but now and again, if I want something fairly straight ahead and fun, then they sort of fill that spot for me.
Right, right. And this was them definitely surviving in the post-Bon Scott era. So
For sure.
something can be said for that.
Cool.
For sure. Okay, I guess if I'm gonna go in chronological order, why not? I will start off with an album from 1981. And some of these I probably brought up before. Maybe it was a song, maybe it was just like, you know, discussing metal in general.
Hmm.
But this was the sophomore solo album from Ozzy Osbourne. It's Diary of a Madman. His last album with Randy Rhoads.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's just a lot darker than Blizzard of Oz. I think that's why I liked it so much. And it's more metal. Like there's a lot of rock and roll still kind of hanging on. Like you can see where the vestiges of like Never Say Die are on um Blizzard of Oz, whereas this album is like you're really hearing more Randy Rhoads and more of that neoclassical kind of thing
Hmm.
on things like the title track. And I think Ozzy's voice sounds great on it. So yeah, I mean, it's probably my favorite, not only my favorite Ozzy album, but one of my favorite albums of all time.
Wow. High praise indeed. Yeah, I'm kind of a bit weird with his solo stuff. I mean, Sabbath. I don't know. Some of the later albums are maybe kind of sillier, which is kind of rich coming from me, considering I just listed AC/DC. But yeah, some of the later albums, hit and miss. I suppose Randy Rhoads is what makes this record, and we shouldn't forget. Oh, I know the controversy, but we shouldn't forget the great rhythm section they had. Bob Daisley, as well as the fantastic drummer Lee Kerslake, who was in the very underrated band Uriah Heep. So that definitely needs a mention. But yeah, I mean, it's what you would expect Ozzy to do, I guess, after what, 9, 10 years in Sabbath.
Right,
Uh,
right. I
Fresh
mean,
start.
it has more meat to it, I think, than like Bark at the Moon. And like after Bark at the Moon, then you can see where some of it is
Hmm.
kind of splitting the difference into like that bigger hair metal crowd, you know?
Sure. I think
Like flashy guitar
heaviest,
playing.
I think the next heaviest album, in my estimation, after this would probably be something like Osmosis, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that. I
I mean,
mean, No
that
More Tears is more of a rock and roll album.
sure.
I do like, I mean, I don't dislike really any of the solo albums, but I like No Rest for the Wicked is better than Ultimate Sin.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
Turkey.
I mean, it's Ozzy, so what can you say?
What can you say? God rest his soul for sure. Cool, man. All right, so you've gone for Aussie. Let me think. I'm just going to consult my list. I think I'm going to go with another album from 1985. I should have stated Fly on the Wall, it was from that year. I brought this album up before, but I love it so much. I need to actually pick up. I think it was reissued recently. I'm going to go for Hell Awaits by Slayer. I mean, there's not really too much you can say about this. It is probably one of my favorite metal records, and my favorite of theirs. I think it was a record that for me kind of showed that there was more strings to Slayer's bow. Um, I mean, obviously from Rain and Blood onwards, it would take a fairly brutal, somewhat monotonous at times route, or although those albums are still great. I think Hell Awaits for me was a bit more varied and certainly a little bit progressive in places. I love the real darkness of it. The first time I remember seeing the cover, I don't know, I think I was quite disturbed by it. I was only, what, 16, 17, so, I've never seen anything like that before. But yeah, really good record. Great Dave Lombardo on drums. Not really much else to add to it, as I've brought it up before, but I do think it's probably for me the defining metal record, at least for me. So 1985's Hell Awaits.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong with it. We've talked about how it's kind of like the proto death metal album.
Yeah,
And yeah, I think that the production on it darkened things up, and it's distinctly heavier than what they were doing with a denser guitar sound than the stuff on like Show No Mercy,
sure.
where they were basically kind of like in Diamond Head, Judas Priest territory, just faster.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. I mean, I'd still love that record, but this was definitely a step up, most certainly. That was fun, but it was kind of you can tell how young the band was and that they were just starting out. This record, I really feel like, for me, cements the real Slayer sound, um, that evilness that they would conjure up.
Yeah, it's more cohesion from here to Rain and Blood than it is from it's a bigger leap from Show No Mercy to Rain and Blood.
Absolutely, yeah. It's between those two albums. I suppose you could call it kind of something of a intermediary or a bridge between those two. So yeah, cool.
Sure. All right. My next one is going to come from 1982,
Hmm.
and it's another band that had a big change in the lineup. Um, and it's Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast album, where Bruce Dickinson stepped in and kind of took them to the next level. I don't think that that can be argued. There's a lot of people, I know a lot of guys that will say, well, and they're typically more into punk rock. It'll be like,
Yeah,
well, I prefer the Paul Di'Anno years.
yeah.
Like, yeah, but could he sing Hallowed Be Thy Name?
Of course
I don't
not.
know. I don't see him having that kind of power. And, his voice broke it a lot sooner than like Bruce Dickinson was able to kind of belt things up into the rafters. And that became like a signature of the sound of what we think of as Iron Maiden.
Hmm.
Um, no disrespect to Paul Di'Anno. I mean, I like the first two albums. I just think that everything just kind of the energy of the band shifted in the right direction. And I don't really say album sales mean much of anything, but I think that it definitely broke them through and made them what they are today.
Yeah, absolutely, and possibly a more stable character. I know that Paul Di'Anno had his issues with various substances and what have you, so maybe from that perspective, Dickinson was more reliable. You know me, I'm not really a Maiden fan, but I understand why you would choose this one. It certainly marked the band as, it had to be done. The switch had to be done if they were going to get anywhere. If I had to listen to Maiden, personally speaking, you mentioned the punk thing. Diano's voice probably does it more for me, but um, I understand from a technical standpoint, the move had to be made, and Dickinson is a fabulous vocalist, and from here on in, they really went on to fame and fortune, albeit on their own terms. So yeah, totally get it.
All right, what you got?
All right, so I'm going to change the tone from Slayer and to something much, much slower. I'm going for 1986's Born Too Late by the American doom band St. Vitus. And before this, they did a couple of albums with Scott Regers. And then I think he left, he'd had enough, and they brought in the legend that is Mr. Scott Wino Weinreich of The Obsessed. This album to me, I mean, if you were gonna put next to Volume 4 or whatever, if you were gonna say to someone like, "Oh, here's an album to get you into Doom," you would also play them this. It kind of takes what Black Flag were doing in a way as well. That sort of very lethargic, um, uh, proto proto doom slash metal sound, and just really goes even slower. The title track, of course, is an absolute classic, but there's also numbers like Clear Window Pane that's got a bit more pace to them. To me, this is a defining moment. I also recommend the album after it too. If I can remember what it was called now, not Thirsty and Miserable, that was an EP. Mournful Cries. These two records, but particularly this one for me, is like the Ne Plus Ultra of American doom metal. So yeah, definitely one for people to check out.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, for me, St. Vitus would be in the top of if we did a top 10 Doom bands, it would definitely be in the top five.
Oh yeah,
And this would be my favorite album from them. Wino always struck me as being kind of like the Doom Lemmy.
yeah.
And he's super passionate on this album. Like it's like very heart-wrenching. It sounds like he's losing his mind on an LSD trip some of the time. Um, which I guess some of the songs are about, but he definitely excelled on this one. I think it's better than anything he's done in The Obsessed. But
Old
yeah.
statement. I mean, I guess it's kind of interesting. For me, they're like two different bands. So you got St. Vitus, who are basically Sabbath, and then you got the Obsessed with basically biker metal. So they're like the Motorhead of Doom. Whereas the St. Vitus just sounds like, the proteges of Sabbath with a bit of Black Flag thrown in. But yes, I take your point, absolutely. What can you say? I mean, it's just such a pivotal record, and there would have been some bands like Cathedral later on, Electric Wizard, and people like that that would have, I'm sure, had this in their collection and on a steady rotation. So for that reason, it made my list.
Right, yeah. I mean, I wore that cassette out when I was a kid. I found it on in some used bookstore that also
Wow,
sold like cassettes.
wow.
I was in high school. I wasn't a kid, but yeah. I think what I liked about it the most is how like miserable and dark it is.
It is, yeah.
So,
Great record,
my tastes haven't changed a whole lot, just kind of expanded.
always good.
My next one, speaking of dark, maybe not
Mhm,
miserable, but definitely dark, is an influence. We talked about how St. Vitus was influential on Doom. I guess this album would be influential on black metal.
mhm.
And it's from 1984. It's Merciful Fates, Don't Break the Oath.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I mean, I was wrestling between this and Abigail by King Diamond, and it's just hard to beat this album. You see these things, at least I get them on my feed online. If I'm on Facebook, this make you pick between this album or that one. And I guess if you made me pick between this and Iron Maiden or Ozzy, I'd probably just turn my computer off. But
yeah.
yeah, it's like King Diamond sounds great. The production is a lot darker and denser,
Sure.
and I think it captures what they do best of any of their recordings. So yeah, there we go. Don't break the oath.
Yeah, good record. I have a soft spot for Merciful Fate. Maybe not so much King Diamond solo stuff, but certainly these guys, exceptional musicians. There's kind of some proggy aspects to it, which I think anyway, kind of very a good sense of drama as well, and that's obviously down to King Diamond's vocal style and what have you. What I would say is his voice is an acquired taste, isn't it? I would say.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to like 80s metal falsetto yodeling, I think he does it best.
Yeah, I mean, I actually like it. It doesn't really bother me, but I can understand if some people are like, "Oh, like the music, but not sure about this." But seriously, do check out Merciful Fate. Definitely important, as you said yourself, in the development of black metal. Not necessarily, I would say necessarily sonically, because it's kind of a bit more traditional in a sense, but certainly in terms of thematically and obviously on a visual level, especially with Diamond himself. So yeah, cool, nice one.
I think sonically it would depend on what bands you're talking about because I
Okay.
think that like Emperor owes a lot to
Ah,
Merciful Fate as well as like Satyricon and
Fatal
Dimmu
Effect.
Borgir. So maybe not the early, although I'm sure they probably had Merciful Fate in their collections. I know that Hellhammer likes Merciful Fate, but um, maybe not as much Mayhem and Dark Throne. Although the new Dark Throne album, they try to sound like Merciful Fate, for better
Yeah.
or for worse. But
Cool.
there you go.
Very good. All right. So, keeping on the black metal tip, I'm going with a somewhat infamous record, as well, at the time of its release, certainly 1987's Into the Pandemonium by, of course, Celtic Frost. Um, up until this point, of course, Celtic Frost, they'd been doing their sort of proto black metal thrash thing, two stunning albums, and then when they released this, it was a real curveball. I mean, you had in there a cover of Wall of Voodoo's Mexican Radio, okay, and then you had sort of industrially things going on with songs like One in Their Pride, and there was sort of gothic stuff, and there was the use of what do you call it, strings and orchestras and what have you. It's a very divisive record. It also saw them uh, enter into some bit of litigation with the then label Noise Records. And yeah, I just love it for just the sheer amount of variety on it. I feel like this is a precursor to the more experimental wing. You touched upon bands like Dimmu Borgir and people like that, but also there's a band called Rotting Christ, isn't there? That I feel kind of built upon what the vibe of what this album was creating in terms of creativity and more avant-garde elements. So for that reason, it's made my list.
Yeah, and we've talked about how like riff wise, I think that Celtic Frost had some influence on bands like Obituary too. Some of the like slower, more death doom bands.
Sure.
Definitely influenced by them. I mean, it's a great album. I'm not going to complain about any Celtic Frost album. So I figured you would pick them, so I did not.
Too predictable, man.
And
Um,
although my last pick was obvious choice,
hmm,
this one there was a lot of different people I was wrestling with, and I just chose this album because it seemed like it was the most important. Like I
sure.
could have gone with Dio, I could have gone with anybody from Grim Reaper to accept. But instead, Judas Priest is not mentioned on my list because all my favorite Judas Priest albums are from the 70s. So with
Yeah.
that, I'm going to go from this album from 1984. It is Metallica's Ride the Lightning,
Yeah.
which, I like better than Kill 'Em All and better than Master of Puppets actually, because
I
once
do.
again, it's darker, it's heavier. The production I feel is more dialed in. On Master of Puppets, I think they were pushing the speed thing as much as they could go and kind of drawing out
Hmm.
some songs way too long. Even though I loved it as a teenager, it's, when I think what stood the test of time the best, I'm going to say this album.
Yeah, it's a fabulous record, and I'm in total agreement with you on that one. That I actually prefer it to Master of Puppets. Kill 'Em All I like, but yeah, obviously it was them. It was their first record. It was kind of a little bit intentionally sloppy. Kind of the Motorhead worship was definitely there. Fun record though it is, but yeah, Ride the Lightning. I mean, that opening track, Fire, Fight Fire with Fire. Jesus Christ! The first time I heard that, I was like, "What on earth is this?" I was listening to hardcore and then I heard that song. So it's a stunning record. In my opinion, I don't feel like they've ever bettered this, and I know I have to be careful what I say here. I know it goes cold. There's a lot of Metallica coverage and a lot of love for those later records, but I kind of I've not really listened to Metallica for years because some of the later output just does nothing for me. But if I was going to go back to them on the occasions that I do, it's definitely this record. So I ain't going to disagree.
Yeah, we can say whatever because I'm willing to fight somebody that this album is the best Metallica album. I'm
Maybe,
a
oh yeah,
I'm a pretty big guy, so I think
you
we
are.
got that covered. All right, what you got next?
Okay, man. So my final choice was Napalm Death and their 1987 debut Scum. Um, I think the first time I heard this, I mean, obviously I was listening to Black Flag, I was listening to, Suicidal Tendencies, COC, etc. And then, I got this record and I was like, God, it makes those albums sound tame by comparison. In case you didn't, people, very, very quick history. They started off as a cross punk band in essence, way back in about 81, 82. And then this is an album of two halves. So you've got Mick Harris, of course, who was a mainstay for a couple of years. But then you've got Justin Broadrick and Nick Bullen, who would go on to do different projects soon after industrially things. Then side two or side B would be the lineup that would be on the next couple of records, as the aforementioned Mick Harris, Bill Steer, and Lee Dorian. So it's a very important record in terms of breaking the speed barrier. It's the album that, in essence, created grindcore. I know people mention Siege and Deep Wound and stuff like that and DRI. Yes, okay, I understand that argument. But if you want like the proper genesis, as it were, of this genre, this record is it. And they went on to do more death metal things, which I wasn't really that interested in. But for me, this record and the follow up are the kind of the Napalm Death that I really enjoy. So for that reason, I've gone for Scum.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really argue against that one because I mean, it's important to extreme metal as we know it. You know,
Yeah.
I would hear it. I remember the first times I heard it were on a college radio show that would play metal, and they would play Napalm Death, which I don't think I got until later. It took me a little while before I picked up the album, but yeah, I mean,
What can you
it's an
say?
important one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing how many different bands came out of these first two records. Bloody Godflesh, Head of David, my God, Cathedral. It's spawned so many spin-off bands as well, equally as good. So we've got them to thank for that as well.
For sure. Well, I guess I'm going to my fifth and final pick is going to be probably pretty obvious the way I've talked about it in the past. It's from 1988 and it's Slayer's South of Heaven. The reason that I pick it over Rain and Blood is because, well, it's better because of songwriting and
Yes.
it's darker and it doesn't feel rushed.
Agreed.
And, I was reading an interview with Jacob Bannon from Converge, and he was talking about this album too. And he was saying how, they were opened up doors sonically that, you know, really hadn't been tread in a lot of areas, like with the title track and, some of the more melodic stuff that they were like throwing in here while keeping, they were still keeping the intensity. So, yeah, it showed that there's more than one way to be the heaviest band. So, there we go.
Absolutely, and I feel like it was definitely needed. It would have been huge mistake if they'd have tried to top Rain and Blood. And I love the dynamics on this album, and funnily enough, it actually feels more evil than that album. Because they're obviously the tempos are a lot slower. There's a darker feel to it. It's not just like having to go as fast as possible. As much as that record is really enjoyable, and I still listen to it to this day. You're right. There's definitely more layers to this record, and the songwriting is less rushed, and just I don't know. It just feels it doesn't feel like it's ever dated. Um, and it's definitely one that people need to dig into a bit more, I would say. Of the 80s era in any case.
Right,
So
right. I think that, there's probably a lot of Kerry King's influence on it because he's a huge Judas Priest fan.
Yeah,
And you can hear a lot of like even early Judas Priest on it, like stuff like Sad Wings of Destiny.
sure. In fact,
So yeah,
don't they do? Isn't I think a bonus track on this, isn't it? Judas
they
cover.
do Dissident Aggressor from Sin
That's
After Sin.
yeah, and they do a really good cover of that. So yeah,
Yeah, for sure. All right, there you go. Next week I think we're gonna do the top five new wave albums
yeah,
from the 80s. I mean, where else could new wave come from but the 80s?
yeah, right.
So I guess we got to start the 70s, but we'll talk about that next week. So I
Yeah,
guess click all the buttons you got to click. Don't say anything bad about Ride the Lightning, and we'll see you next week.